everybody. Today is Purim. It's Friday here in Israel, where it's February 26th, 2021. We are on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and it is Purim. And here I'm talking to you from Jerusalem, and we are continuing our studying in the book of Esther. Today we're going to study chapter 4. In chapter 4, actually, Haman and Achashverosh are two major characters, our protagonists that we had till now, our heroes of the book until now. They're not here. Instead, we have an inner dialogue in this chapter between Mordechai and Esther. So let's read the chapter and see what the book is telling us. And Mordechai knew all that had transpired. And Mordechai rent his clothes, and put on sackcloth and ashes. He took off his clothes, and he went out in the midst of the city and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. And he came up as far as the king's gate, for one may not enter the king's gate dressed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's orders and his edict reached, there was great mourning by the Jews, fasting and weeping and lamenting. Sackcloth and ashes were put on most prominent. And what happens? Vatavona and the Esther's maidens and her chamberlains came and told her. And the queen was extremely horrified. And she sent clothing to dress Mordechai and to take off his sackcloth. But he did not accept. Well, what do we know here? The maidens of the queen came and told her that Mordechai is wearing sackcloth and ashes. And she was terrified, extremely terrified. You would think that she was extremely terrified by hearing what Haman was planning on doing to the Jewish people. We would think she was terrified by the fact that Mordechai is in mourning situation. But instead, what do we see? She's extremely terrified, and she sent clothing to dress Mordechai. She's extremely terrified, and she sends clothes to dress Mordechai. Means she's extremely terrified by the fact that Mordechai is not wearing a tie, and he's not wearing a jacket. He's sitting at the but he did not accept. We don't even know why he didn't accept. And then it goes on, Esther summoned Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he appointed before her, and she commanded him concerning Mordechai to know what this was and why this was. So he was trying to find out, what is the story? What is going on? So Hatach comes to bring the clothes to Esther, and he doesn't receive. He's not accepting it. Doesn't explain why he's not accepting it. So Hatach went forth to Mordechai to the square which was before the king's gate, and Mordechai told him that all that had befallen him, and a full account of the silver that Haman had proposed to weigh in the king's treasures on the Jews' account to cause him to perish. So Mordechai told the Tach, the middleman that Esther had sent him. He told him what's going on. And the Tach comes to Esther, and Mordechai ordered her to come before the king to beseech him and to beg to him for her people. And Esther said to the Tach, are you crazy? All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who comes to the king into the inner court who is not summoned, there is but one law to put him to be put to death, except the one who the king extends the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been summoned to come to the king these 30 days. So he says, listen, you can't, it's impossible. I'm endangering my life. What do you think? And Mordechai ordered to reply to Esther, do not imagine to yourself that you will escape in the king's house from among the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue will arise for the Jews from elsewhere, and you and your father's household will perish. And who knows whether at a time like this you will attain the kingdom. So what we see here, we see that Esther sends Mordechai clothing, and he tells her, go beseech the king to ask for the people of Israel. And she says, it's impossible. Everybody knows it's a danger to do such a thing. And Esther says, I'm endangering. And Mordechai says to her, don't think that you're going to be silent. You're going to get away from it. You can't get away from it. And Esther ordered to reply to Mordechai, go assemble all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast on my behalf. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, day and night. Also, I and my maidens will fast the same matter. Then I will go to the king contrary to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordechai passed and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. We see some very interesting thing here in the book, in this chapter. We see the chapter begins with Mordechai removing his clothes. What is removing his clothes? He's actually, even though he's a Supreme Court judge sitting at the gates of the city, he takes off his clothes. He removes his Persian identity and he goes to his godly identity. And he sends the message to Esther. Now, in the beginning of the chapter, as was until now, Mordechai is telling Esther what to do. Just like he told her, don't tell who you were from. Don't give out information about your identity. He also gives her orders what to do and what not to do. But here, for the first time, we have a dialogue between Mordechai and Esther. Shalom, shalom, Victoria, shalom. We have a dialogue here between Mordechai and Esther. They're not personally meeting each other. Each one of them is in a different place. Mordechai is way out in the streets. Esther is in the palace. And Mordechai is giving Esther orders, and she's saying that she's not going to do it. But eventually, Esther herself takes upon herself the responsibility. Now, what is the great thing that's happening here? We saw in the previous chapter, Haman took a lot to decide a date when he's going to destroy the Jewish people. But what does this lot mean? The lot is a basic Persian faith that everything is in the hand, there's no freedom of choice. Everything is in the hands of a determined date. If something happens on that determined date, this is when it's going to be. You can't change anything. But Mordechai and Esther are taking off their Persian clothes. If we saw in chapter 1 the whole idea of clothes in the Persian Empire is so important. We'll see later on where Mordechai is dressed with this and taking off this and taking off. The whole concept is the dress, what you're wearing and how you're wearing. And Mordechai takes it off. And Esther takes upon herself to endanger her life for the sake of her people. And she says, no, things can change. How can they change? By fasting. How can they change? By prayer to God. We're not living in a fatalistic situation, is what Esther says. Haman believes in the poor and the lot. But Esther, she takes upon herself and says, things can be changed. Things can be changed if I take upon myself responsibility. And this is what Mordechai is trying to say. And once she does that, the final sentence of the chapter is, and Mordechai passed and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Until now, we were used to the fact that Mordechai was commanding Esther. But now, Esther goes into the shoes of the person who's taking responsibility and taking the initiative and understanding that it's her responsibility to bring back and save the people of Israel. And she is willing to understand that in spite of the fact that she's deep inside the palace, she's going to fast just like Mordechai did. And recall the whole idea of Persian idea was not fasting, celebrating, drinking, eating, banquets. And here we see that Esther and Mordechai are fasting, which means removing the clothes of the Persian perspective, of the Persian environment, removing the actions of the Persian people of drinking and eating at banquets and taking off clothes and stopping to eat and accepting upon themselves the initiative of saving their people, the responsibility of what God has appointed them to do. And this is the first turning point in the entire book where we see that the people are taking upon themselves a responsibility. Shalom, shalom, Captain Ron. We're seeing that people are taking upon themselves a responsibility, not giving up to what will be. As we saw that Achashverosh and Haman, not based on a lot, but understanding that the initiative is in the people's hands and understanding that we have to take responsibility. Shalom and Kolton. Shalom to all of you. Blessings and happy Purim. Wonderful, happy holiday from Jerusalem. And we see here, the chapter here where we have a strong dialogue, and the dialogue between Mordechai and Esther begins with a middleman. There's a middleman in the middle there. But at a certain point, the middleman disappears. And the dialogue is direct between Mordechai and Esther, and they understand each other. They understand each other. And as it says, if you be quiet, if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue will arise from somewhere else. What does that mean? If you remain silent, it means that you don't care. If you don't care, you can't be in the leadership. If you don't care, you can't stand up and take action. If you don't care, you can't be part of taking responsibility. Being silent does not only mean ignoring, does not only mean not hearing. It means hearing, this is the situation. There's no two options. There are no three options. There's no let's wait, we'll see what's going to happen. There's either you don't do or you do. You do, it means you're taking responsibility. You don't take responsibility means you are remaining silent, meaning you are declaring, I don't care. And Esther and Mordechai together reach the conclusion. And Esther understands at the same time, she can't go to the king and say, listen, change your mind. She can't beseech in front of the king, change your mind. She's not at that point yet. She first has to make the change. She first has to make the change and create a new reality. And also she understands that right now, the signet stamp, the signet ring is in the hands of Haman. And Haman right now can do whatever he wants. So it's not enough to go and beseech the king. She has to take action. And from here on, we'll see she makes a plan and she takes action. And I wish you all, we should all learn from this Purim. We're seeing how this year, once again, we're in lockdown and we're still under the understanding of the COVID, but we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to take action and try to bring support for those who are in need. We have an obligation. And as Esther here is saying, for such a time is when a person has to recognize a specific time where it's his responsibility to take the initiative. And he does that. And that's our responsibility. On Purim, we are obligated to take the responsibility, to take our responsibility in our hands, our destination, and to overcome the determinism, and to understand that changes can be made and that we can bring joy to our friends and neighbors. Shalom to all of you. Wonderful for joining us, and happy Purim from Jerusalem. I love you all. Thank you, Cindy. I'm happy to hear that Pastor Paul preached the same kind of idea. Thank you very much. Shalom. Bye-bye.